In 1953, Harold Colburn, an energetic and imaginative Manx businessman, became so dissatisfied with the poor BBC TV reception supplied by the Home Moss transmitter that he made plans to set up his own transmitter on the island. However, he fell foul of the Wireless Telegraphy Act, and his attempts were pronounced illegal and abandoned after angry exchanges with the British authorities. The following year, another UK Act established the Independent Television Authority, or ITA, which was empowered to set up and regulate a network of commercial TV stations throughout Britain, signalling a victory for the lobby that had long demanded commercial TV. In 1956, Tynwald decided to extend this act to the island by order in council, and the island became part of the North West's Granada network and gave up any right to establish its own TV station in the immediate future. Though the British government had eventually been persuaded to permit the development of commercial TV, partly because there was widespread disapproval of the BBC's broadcasting monopoly, it still set its face resolutely against commercial radio. To some extent, this was because radio was still thought to be a more prestigious and influential medium than television, and also because in the USA there had been a chaotic proliferation of commercial stations. However, commercial TV soon became a great success and drew even more people away from their radio sets. Fortunately for radio, it was given a new lease of life by two major developments. One was the invention of the transistor, a tiny semiconductor which could replace the much bulkier valves. It was developed in the USA in 1947 and led to the manufacture of much cheaper and more portable radio sets powered by batteries. Sales took off in the USA during the 1950s, and trannies, as they were called, were widespread among the young in Britain from the 1960s onwards, while radios gradually became standard equipment in motorcars. Two further developments increased the popularity of radio. One was the arrival of stereo sound, broadcast regularly from 1966 onwards, and the other was the development of VHF, very high frequency transmissions, and FM, frequency modulation, which dramatically reduced interference and improved the quality of reception. The other saviour of mass radio was the arrival of rock and pop music and the development of records, each dependent on the other. Bulky wind-up gramophones, which played heavy graphite 78 RPM records, had been in use since the beginning of the century, but in 1949 RCA Victor developed a 45 RPM vinyl disc, which was much smaller, lighter, tougher than graphite, and contained two single tracks, one on each side. At about the same time, Columbia perfected the 33 1/3 RPM long playing record, known as LP, which carried about 8 tracks on each side. So when rock music burst on the scene in the 1950s, performed by icons like Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis, a social revolution took place. Here was music for the young, all the more attractive to them because it was generally disliked by their elders. Unlike Britain, the government of the USA had permitted radio stations to proliferate in a somewhat chaotic way right from the start, and as rock and roll music grew in popularity during the 1950s, it could be heard by young Americans on any of their hundreds of radio stations. In Britain, however, it could only be heard on Radio Luxembourg, and only in the evenings. Moreover, in many parts of Britain, the signal was weak, and there was a good deal of interference. It was no use looking for help to the BBC. So what were the young to do? Harold Colburn's answer was they should tune into the Isle of Man. In 1959, a new Lieutenant Governor came to the Isle of Man. He was Serrano Garvey, a very experienced administrator who had been Governor of British Honduras and of Fiji. Arriving on the island at a time when the economy was in a poor state and the holiday industry in particular was in need of a boost, Garvey proved to be full of ideas about how matters could be improved. These included the lowering of taxes in order to encourage an influx of wealthy residents, the opening of a casino, and several other business initiatives. He was therefore very sympathetic to the arguments of Harold Colburn that if a Manx radio station could be set up to operate on a commercial basis to broadcast modern music to the young of Britain, there was a huge market available and there were great profits to be made. Radio Isle of Man could easily be a bigger and better Radio Luxembourg.